All right, welcome everyone. The session is being recorded. So just a heads up, everyone, I'm hitting the recording button now. My name is Dylan Jillick. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an integrations coordinator at the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. We're so excited to connect with you all today. We're very excited that over 400 folks are registered. Thank you for joining us, whether you're a community partner, a policymaker, or joining from a college campus. These slides in the session recording will be made available to you after the meeting has concluded. We are also tracking questions and we'll be providing a Q&A to registered attendees after the webinar. I'll review the agenda briefly for today's session. My co-host Amy Magisos will begin the session by providing a background on today's topic. We will also have some opening comments from Representative Deborah Entenman, and then be presenting on what we've learned from year 2 of our pilot, as well as our plan for year 3. We'll shift gears into a panel discussion touching on campus strategies and impact for the pilot, and my colleagues will close with an update on what's next for the pilot. I'll pass it to Amy for the next part of today's session.
Thank you, Dylan. We'd like to frame today's discussion of student food security strategies with this shocking reality of the challenge. 44% of Washington students reported food insecurity in the 2024 Washington Student Experience Survey. That's 6% higher than the rate in 2022, and well over half reported food insecurity in some student populations, such as students with dependents and students with low incomes. You get a sense of the impact on this for student success from the student comment on the slide here, and there are many more shared in the 2024 report. The great news, though, is that Washington colleges have been working on solutions with many partners. First, colleges are working to inform and support application for students who may be eligible for food benefits. Navigators are also connecting students to community food resources. These are an important part of the resource puzzle. At the same time, we have to recognize that federal and state policies do create barriers for some students' benefits access, and we know that community resources are stretched thin. Second, most campuses around the state are also implementing emergency food strategies like campus pantries and donated meal swipes. However, colleges are reporting rocketing demands, and many campuses share that these emergency resources serve as the main or only resources available to some students experiencing hunger. So with the scope of need and the impact on students experiencing food insecurity, it's really clear that emergency solutions are insufficient. It won't be possible to food pantry our way out of the scale of need that we see here in Washington. But what are the alternatives? What proactive strategies could actually prevent emergencies, especially for student populations with high levels of food insecurity? And what models could work across very different campus and community conditions and resources in our state? Next slide, please. So today, we're excited to share the initial learning from Washington's Postsecondary Food Security Pilot, which is part of Washington's 2023 Student Basic Needs Act. So the goal of this pilot has been to develop and learn from proactive, preventative approaches to address food insecurity among college and university student populations with low incomes. 6 institutions are testing approaches with a 3-year grant. Washington State University, Columbia Basin College, and Walla Walla Community College on the east side of the state, and Western Washington University, Everett Community College, and Grays Harbor College on the west side of the state. Each pilot has a unique project that is responsive to their unique campus and community contexts. All have worked together in a learning community to share what their observations and learning has been and to troubleshoot challenges. Today, you'll be learning about the initial insights from our pilot evaluation. And with that, I have the honor of introducing Dr. Marie Spiker, who's assistant professor at the University of Washington School of Public Health. So Marie and her colleague, Dr. Jennifer Otten, have been important partners leading the program evaluation of the Postsecondary Food Security Pilot. Marie, thanks so much for joining us to share insights into the pilot strategies and some of the early findings.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. So, Marie Spiker, University of Washington, it has been an honor to lead the evaluation for this program. And what I'll be sharing here today is findings from year 2 of the program, which was the last academic year, 2024 to 2025. If you go to the next slide here, this gives an overview of our evaluation approach, where in doing our evaluation, we looked at both processes and outcomes. So in terms of process, we gathered information about how the pilot program was being implemented at each of the 6 pilot sites, including what kind of services were offered and the reach of how many students were participating. In terms of outcomes, we looked primarily at how the pilot program is impacting student success and food security. And this evaluation draws from data provided by the pilot sites about their own programs and participants, as well as institutional data about academic persistence and retention rates. And some sites were also able to field student surveys last year, which provided food security data as well as open-ended feedback on students' experiences. Some of our evaluation efforts are still in progress. And so the data shared today represents a snapshot of the data that's currently available, and we do have more underway. And if we go to the next slide here, I'll start with some details on process and implementation. Something that is a huge strength of this pilot is that each site is implementing the pilot in a unique way that is tailored to their campus and tailored to their students. When we look across the 6 pilot sites here, they are a mix. They're a mix of 4-year and 2-year institutions on both sides of the state. They range from smaller institutions serving 2,400 students to large institutions serving over 25,000. These campuses also feature a real mix of food environments. So some have robust housing and dining services, others maybe have a few on-campus dining options, and then some have 0 on-campus dining or food vendors of any kind. And these 6 pilot sites, they also have real heterogeneity in their student populations, including things like whether students primarily live on or off campus, what proportion of students have childcare needs, and just levels of basic needs security among the overall population. If we go to the next slide here, this next slide will provide an overview of what the pilot program looked like at each site. In the top row, you'll see some abbreviations for each site that I'll use throughout these slides. And you'll notice near the top that one of the major differences between pilot programs was whether students would participate in the program for just a quarter at a time, or for the whole academic year at Washington State University, or for a 2-year program at Western Washington University. And then we had one site with a different model where there weren't formally enrolled cohorts, and rather services were offered to all students campus-wide. And then looking a little further down the columns here, you'll see that at many sites, pilot programs provided either food directly or money for food that could be used on campus. And so when food or money for food was available on campus, this took on a variety of formats. So a couple examples at Washington State University, first-year students living in on-campus housing had their dining plans upgraded. Or at Grays Harbor and Walla Walla Community College, participants had electronic cards where they could pick up food at on-campus cafes. And then some of the food options available were off-campus. So at Everett Community College, students could use their food cards at an off-campus cafe. And then at Western Washington University, the food cards were for an off-campus food co-op. And students joining the program could get a tour of the co-op and a chance to learn about this new place that they could grocery shop. And then Columbia Basin College had a mix of meals and snacks available on campus, grocery gift cards that could be used off campus, and they also augmented many campus-wide resources, including the campus food pantry and offering some additional wraparound services like financial literacy workshops. In the next slide, there's a snapshot of the reach of the pilot program. So last year, year 2, across the 6 sites, over 3,500 students participated in the pilot. Each site had their own eligibility criteria, and these participation numbers here, they're also shown as a percent of the eligible students. You'll notice quite a range in the proportion of eligible students participating from one site to the next. And of course, there's a trade-off here where sites that provided more intensive services per student would be able to enroll a smaller number of students. We also show these numbers as a percent of the overall student population. And at institutions with a large overall enrollment, this percent might be small simply because of how large the overall student population is. Though we see that at some of the smaller institutions, the pilot program was actually able to reach up to 15% of the total student population, which is huge. A common thread across all sites was that demand for the pilot program far outpaced the resources available. Every site ultimately needed to turn some students away from the pilot. And in doing so, they took the opportunity to connect students to basic needs resources, both on and off campus. And in some ways, the pilot really bolstered their like processes and infrastructure for making these kind of referral and connections for students. If we go to the next slide here, my next couple slides here are going to get into data on impact. So how did the pilot affect student success? And the way that we're looking at this is a few different metrics of academic persistence and retention. So this slide here shows the percent of students who completed the term. So for example, of all the students who started fall quarter or semester, what percent actually finished that quarter or semester? And the way to interpret these graphs that I'll show here and on the next few slides is that we have data for the different sites and also for multiple quarters within those sites. And then within each quarter, we're showing side by side. The percent of pilot participants who completed the term is in the dark green bars on the left. So the dark green bars on the left is the pilot. And then the light green bars on the right show the percent of the overall student population. In these next few slides, I'm just showing data for the 4 community and technical colleges as they all operated on quarters. And 3 of these had students participating on a quarterly basis. And what we see here, when we look across every quarter for which we could calculate this persistence rate across the 4 sites, we see overwhelmingly that in almost every quarter, pilot participants had higher rates of completing the quarter. If we go on to the next slide, this will show another type of persistence rate, which is the percent of students who enrolled in a subsequent term. So how many students from fall quarter persisted until winter or from winter until spring. And similarly, all these graphs are read in the same way, pilot participants in dark green on the left and overall student population on the right. And across the board, we see higher rates of enrolling in a subsequent quarter among the pilot participants compared to their overall student populations. If we go to the next slide, this next metric here, it's about the proportion of students from fall quarter who completed the year. And here you're seeing fewer bars because for each site, we calculate this just once. So among the students who started fall quarter, how many completed spring? And similarly here at all 4 sites, the rate of students completing the year was higher among pilot participants. In the next slide here, the last metric that I'll show is the fall to fall retention rate. So among the students who started the quarter or semester in fall 2024, what percent came back the next year for fall 2025? One thing I'll note is the way that we've calculated these here, these retention rates, they don't take into consideration the students who didn't return because they graduated. So if we were to add all of those in, all the rates would be higher across the board. But the important thing here is that it's the comparison between the pilot and overall student population. And still here, we see that at 3 of the 4 community and technical colleges, pilot participants had a higher fall to fall retention rate than their institution-wide averages. And I want to note how meaningful this is. So each site had their own eligibility criteria, but by and large, the pilot program was available to students who generally were lower income and less well-resourced than the overall student population. And we would expect to see that students who are less well-resourced will generally have lower persistence and retention rates across the board when compared to the total student population. And so to see this group of lower income services or lower income students receiving services that help them to have even better persistence and retention rates than their more well-resourced peers, this is truly an impressive outcome. And I want to note that even if we didn't see higher persistence and retention rates among pilot participants, but if we saw improvements in other areas, like in students' ability to meet their basic food needs, in my opinion, as a public health researcher, this program would still be a smashing success, right? If you improved food security, but if the academic persistence and retention is still a little stubborn, it's still worth doing. It is worth it to improve student food security. But the fact that we are generally seeing, in most cases, improved academic persistence and retention among pilot participants really demonstrates the value of the investment in this program. And then if we go to the next slide, this shows fall to fall retention data for one of the universities, and for our other university, the data are still underway. But for the data that we have here for Western Washington University, this site has two cohorts of pilot participants. So last year, they had sophomores who were in their first year in the pilot program, and then the juniors were in their second and final year of their participation in the pilot program. And similarly here, when we look at both of these cohorts, we're seeing higher fall-to-fall retention among the pilot participants. Then the next slide, this is the last slide of data that I'll show. Some of our sites last year were able to field student surveys and use the USDA's 6-item questionnaire to assess food security, which is about whether students were able to meet their basic food needs. So were they able to access and afford enough food that they didn't need to eat poorly cut portions or skip meals altogether? And we know that food insecurity is linked to worse health outcomes for both physical and mental health, and also linked to worse academic performance. So when we look at the food security data here, for Everett and Grays Harbor, we measured food security at the beginning and end of the quarter. At Western Washington, it was at the beginning and end of the year. And across the board, we are seeing lower rates of food insecurity at the end. So when the quarter of the year wraps up, we see that fewer students in the pilot program had food insecurity than at the start. And there's something really powerful happening here in the data from Western. So if you look at the two clusters of bars on the right half here, you'll remember from the previous slide that students at Western participate in the program for 2 years. So last year, they had a cohort of sophomores who were newly participating in the pilot, and a cohort of juniors who were continuing on their second and final year in the pilot. And you'll notice here, the sophomores started their year with 84% of the group experiencing food insecurity, which decreased to 30% by the end of the year. That's a huge change there. But what I'm really excited about is the juniors. If you look at the cluster bars on the right, the juniors who had received the pilot program in the prior year, right? They had that year of support, and now they're coming into their second year. They started out their year a little better than the sophomores, right? They started out with a lower baseline level of food insecurity, 52% of that cohort, and then that also further decreased to 30% by the end of the year. So this really illustrates something I mentioned earlier, that some sites provided more intensive services to a smaller number of students. And when that happens, you really can see the impact that this really can move the needle on outcomes like food security in a big way. But at the same time, I also want to applaud sites who took a different approach, and recognizing the incredibly high level of need that was widespread across their whole student populations, have really tried to maximize how many students they could reach. So there always will be trade-offs. And I think one of the strengths of this pilot program is the ability for each site to make that determination based of how they want to implement the program based on the nature of the need that they're seeing on their campuses. We go to the next slide. The last thing I'll mention related to impact is that when we started our evaluation efforts, we said, okay, we're going to look at impacts on student success and food security. And something that we didn't set out to find, but it cropped up in an organic way, is this other amazing impact, which is that the pilot program has catalyzed broader impacts on campus-wide food environments, resources, and basic needs support at each of the 6 pilot sites. Every site has shared experiences of how the pilot has created this awareness and momentum around student food security. So it's not just that you have a certain number of students who are now receiving some additional help with meals, but it's that now you have a team of people who is showing up at different spaces around campus. They're connecting with student groups and food vendors and culinary professionals and the campus food pantry and the basic needs navigator. Some sites created student advisory councils that raised important concerns and ideas that turned into real action, like making big changes to the residents' dining hall systems. We see new partnerships cropping up. Like at one site, the off-campus food co-op ended up helping the on-campus food pantry to purchase items at cost. We see the pilot programs working with basic needs navigators to offer workshops on financial literacy and healthy cooking. And we see campuses where there was previously no food vendor on campus, and the pilot program played a huge role in securing a vendor, which is something that benefits every single student on campus for a long time to come. And then my last slide, so to bring it all together, when we look across these 6 sites, I am so impressed with how each site has crafted a program that really works for their campus and their students. In the 2024 to 2025 school year, over 3,500 students participated in the pilot. And among these students, we are seeing strong data in support of higher academic persistence and retention rates and lower rates of food insecurity. And we also see that the pilot program has catalyzed broader partnerships and momentum to support food security on their campuses at large. Our evaluation work is still underway as we have some additional year 2 data rolling in, and all of course, year 3 of the pilot is happening right now. It's currently in progress. And one of the greatest strengths of this pilot is the way that the Washington Student Achievement Council and the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, the way they have administered the pilot has involved regularly convening the pilot sites as a sort of a community of practice to share what they are learning about implementing and evaluating and how they're making changes from one year to the next. We've been capturing a lot of these details so that we have a sort of a blueprint for how other institutions, even if they have their own distinct campuses and populations, or even if they're outside of Washington State, so that everyone can learn from the valuable insights that this team of pilot program leads has been cultivating over the past few years. I am very much in awe of the coordination and the passion that the leads at each site have just poured into their programs to make this pilot truly impactful for their students. They have moved mountains here. They have truly moved the needle, both for the students in their programs and also for all of us in what we can learn about how to better do this work of supporting students and meeting their basic needs. With that, I will end my content here. Happy to field questions now or at the end, and I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Marie. We are delighted to be able to have your insights as our evaluator. Thank you so much for all of your efforts and flexibility. I invite everyone to think about what you have been hearing about early findings, include questions in the chat, and we will swing back around at the end of our time together to do that. We are so thrilled that Representative Entenmann has been able to join us. Active voting on the floor won't stop Representative Entenmann from joining us today. So welcome. We're so delighted you're here. As a champion of food security, of student success, it's very meaningful to have you here with us. We would love to be able to spotlight you for the time that we have with you in the next 5 minutes to really share more about why food security for post-secondary students has really been a priority for you as a legislator and as a leader. So, Representative Entenmann, thanks for being here. And might be having
Here we go.
technical issues.
I
Perfect.
don't know if you can see me and hear me, but I'm hoping.
We can hear you very clearly, and we can see your beautiful picture.
Okay, I'm
That
so
worked.
sorry. For some reason, my phone thinks I'm in the car and I can't get it off of safe driving mode. So I've tried before and it won't do it. Anyway, I want to say, first of all, the news that we heard from the person who's doing the evaluation from that group was phenomenal. I am overwhelmed with the success of the program. I want to thank everyone who is doing this work because I knew at the core that it was important. I'm glad that we work with stakeholders to have this happen. We've had students tell us that they were Food Insecure. We've had other folks on campus, but now all of this data is coming together and it's going to allow us to strengthen this program as we move forward. I know that this short legislative session probably won't allow an expansion of the food navigators to full-time, full pay, but my goal is to make sure in the next legislative session that we go in with that as a priority. I am beyond the moon. You just do not know how happy I am. I knew that there were hungry college students, and I knew that there were hungry college students because when I was originally in college, I was a hungry college student. I don't understand how we can give a student free and reduced price lunch when they're in high school to think that they won't need it when they're in college, or that we know when we look at our community and technical colleges and our colleges where we have first generation students, they're navigating so many new things and they don't always have all of the tools in the toolbox that they need to ensure that they have nutritional food. The learning about the collaboration between getting food from an outside pantry to an on-campus pantry is phenomenal. Learning that students are learning how to cook and learning how to cook healthy food is phenomenal. Just having discussion about food insecurity brings up other things, and students can do what they need to do so that they can make sure that they are getting what they need on campus, whether it is food or something else, is also phenomenal. We are doing what I hope that this would do. It is happening in a way that is even more impactful than I can imagine. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who is actually making it work.
Representative Entenmann, I don't know if you can see it, but there are a lot of applause and hearts that are reacting to your comments and your encouragement. And we're grateful to have you as a true champion and leader in our state and nation. So thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule to speak with us and to learn with us. I'd like to hand this webinar over to Jennifer Dellinger, who will be facilitating a discussion about what all this means and what it looks like from the student, the campus, and the regional perspective. So on to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I want to welcome our panelists. We have three amazing folks joining us today that represent the work across the universities and CTCs happening through the Food Security Pilot. And they're going to speak to campus strategy and impact. But before we introduce them, I just want to say feel free to put all your questions in the chat as you have them. Time pending, we'll be able to get to questions, but we've also asked the panelists to help answer questions in the chat when they have a moment. So first, I want to welcome Dr. Carly Schiffner, president at Grace Harbor College in Aberdeen, Washington. Carly has a wealth of leadership experience in higher education, including workforce education, guided pathways, and student services. Dr. Schiffner is a champion of equitable access to education and a successful advocate for supporting students. Next, I want you guys to help me welcome Michael Sledge, Dean of Student Life at Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington. Michael provides operational leadership, strategic vision, and direction for Western Student Life Department and has extensive experience in basic needs work, including strategic planning and student care. And last but definitely not least, please help me welcome Jesse Ulmer, Benefits Navigator at Everett Community College in Everett, Washington. Jesse helps students find and access basic needs, support services, and works within food security. Jesse has a background in employment readiness and access to technology and is excited to continue the partnership between the community, students, staff, and faculty to bring equitable, sustainable, and accessible food resources to campus. So we'll start with a facilitated discussion, and Carly will be up first. So, Carly, as a president, you are part of the post-secondary and workforce development of your whole region. Why is food security important to your community and your institution's goals?
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Amy from WASAC. And it was just a delight to see everyone on this, not only this panel, but on the participant list. So many familiar friends and names and faces, and just I know that we're all in this work together. So just delighted that there's so many of us working towards food security. So thank you again for the invitation to be on this panel. For close to 3 years, I have served as the president of Grays Harbor College. The college's service district spans Grays Harbor and Pacific counties. Both are rural, coastal counties that have some of the highest poverty rates in the state. Within the two counties, we collaborate with 19 K-12 school districts through a variety of programs like Running Start and with the Twin Harbor Skill Center. 92% of the high school students in our two counties qualify for free and reduced lunch. The need does not diminish once those students are enrolled at Grays Harbor College. When the Washington Student Achievement Council issued their basic needs survey recently to all colleges, we learned that 1 out of every 2 students indicated that they are or have experienced food insecurity while at some point being a student at Grays Harbor College. Prior to my arrival, the reality of our students' food insecurity was just starting to become realized. Student Life started a food pantry and worked with local entities for food donations and worked with our college foundation for the infrastructure needed to operate a food pantry with frozen and perishable items. At this time, even that wasn't enough. It meant that many staff on their own dime brought food and snacks in to make those available to our students that we served. So when House Bill 1559 passed in 2023, I knew that Grays Harbor College would be a great site for operating the food security pilot. Work on the pilot got underway in 2024, and as you saw earlier in the slides, we have served hundreds of students in the past 2 years. Students participating in the food security pilot are supported in a multitude of ways. Through this program, students are issued meal vouchers for our on-campus dining facility, and students can also utilize grab-and-go options at our campus bookstore. In addition, students are provided with vouchers for use at local restaurants as well as local grocery stores. The positive impact of the food security pilot has been realized and was realized instantly. The proof is in the numbers. Our students' retention quarter to quarter has improved. Therefore, the number of students stopping out the first year has lessened. In fall of 2024, there were 162 students enrolled in the pilot. 159 of them successfully completed the quarter. Out of the 162, 154 were retained into winter quarter. 95% of our students are being retained through this program. We are still too new in the pilot to see some of the impact on our degree completion, but our qualitative data suggests that the food security pilot is a key component to their completion. The pilot is making a huge difference, as I mentioned. Student participants have shared how thankful they are for their basic needs being met. They indicate that the college cares about them and they feel that, and they have confidence to continue with their studies. So in my 2 decades plus of working in the community and technical college system in the state of Washington, I've never seen a pilot program be more successful almost instantaneously. So I'll stop there. I could continue on, but I know we're short on time. So Jen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Carly, thank you. Understanding the need that continues from secondary to post-secondary is critical, and the work you and your college is leading in these proactive food approaches. That 95% of students retained in the quarter to quarter, that data shows that your efforts are working. So thank you. Michael, our next question is for you. How is the pilot different, and what are you learning about as far as impact?
Absolutely. I'm really glad to be with everyone today. Thanks to the presenters. A special thanks to Representative Entenmann for sponsoring this work at the very beginning. So in developing this pilot at Western Washington University, we began by centering both retention and food insecurity at the same time. And we know from our retention efforts in general that 2 of the top 4 reasons that we don't retain students are number 2, because they couldn't meet their basic needs, and number 4, because they didn't have sufficient financial aid. We do a survey, as many places do, of non-returning students, and that's consistently what we what we hear. The order might turn around a little bit. So we looked at, focused on Washington State residents who were sophomores with significant unmet financial need as calculated by our financial aid staff. And our planning group, in thinking about what is it that we do, how is it that we attempt to get food credit to these folks, we ended up deliberating a lot and checking out a number of different options. We ended up going with our local food co-op for a number of reasons. One is that all of the grant money, every dollar, went to food credit for the students. There was no overhead cost by Western or by the co-op. The co-op provided existing what are called non-equity memberships. So students were eligible for every sale without paying a co-op membership. The co-op only sells groceries and basic household items. We also could and did restrict alcohol sales. These are sophomores, so that shouldn't have been a problem anyway. And there's a values alignment between Western and the co-op. Additionally, logistically, the co-op, there's two, but the one that's closest is very easily, it's easy to get there by foot, by bus, by car. So we knew it would be logistically easy for students to get there. And then last, the co-op social media that existed as we were doing our deliberation, much of which was created by Western students who were interns at the co-op, focused on how to shop on a budget, how to utilize bulk foods, just some basic recipe ideas, and was done in very, there were TikTok versions, there were Instagram versions, so there was some just already ready to plug and play social media that we can use. So as we implemented it, each quarter, the pilot participants received food credit on a membership card. So each quarter we checked to make sure they were still registered, and then provided them the credit. And what we've learned, as Marie's results earlier show, is the pilot obviously reduces food insecurity and increases access to food resources that students need. And then we can see for institution-specific data that the retention rate for pilot participants is higher than the overall cohort. And we're still working on that data, and we're in the midst of year 3. So we have last year's, we're doing 2 years. So we have last year's cohort as well as a new cohort this year. 2 other things. One is that student feedback is uniformly positive. We've changed the amount a little bit from year to year to see if a change in calculation and credit resulted in anything different in terms of outcome. But one really important unintended outcome for many, which we saw through qualitative info at the end of the year surveys or anecdotal feedback to basic needs staff. And then we did educational events that focused on grocery planning and meal prep for students. Students were reporting to us that they were eating healthier. We don't know if this is simply because they had a quarterly allotment of food credit that could only be used for food. Having that may have prompted better planning. We like to think our educational programming may have had something to do with it, maybe something about how the co-op approached their marketing. But having dedicated food credit appears to be really beneficial for students in pilot in more than one way. And I know there are some quotes here. One of the quotes that's not on here is really an anecdote, and that's from someone in the year 1 who said when he received the food credit, previously he would go to a local low-cost grocery store, and he would buy once a month and buy a bunch of protein and freeze it and use it. He did not eat vegetables, fresh fruit or vegetables at all, and that this allowed him to eat in a more healthy and holistic way. So that's really stuck with me for what I think are obvious reasons. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Western has been really focused on basic needs and food security, and you've really seen a significant increase in needs. And I think the success of your proactive approach is due in part because you sought to understand why students were not accessing the resources. And you've really developed an approach that is easily accessible and has organically centered helping students find healthy food options, which should be available to all. So great work. Our next question is for Jesse. Throughout this pilot, Everett has taken the opportunity to learn about the student experience. Can you share with us what you've learned?
Of course. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all your hard work. It's so heartening to see this network and to know that there's so many people who care about the success of our students. So our program was called EVCC Eats, and we partnered with a local cafe that is part of a nonprofit that supports job training and housing. And we had food gift cards for students to utilize at the cafe, as well as for 2 quarters, we did on-campus orders. And that was for students who did not have the ability to travel to the cafe. It's about 3 miles. It's on a bus route, so most students could access it. But of course, if you're one of our nursing students and you're held hostage in the nursing building all day, you need a little bit of closer access. In very exciting news, we are now pivoting to an on-campus vendor. They are halal and kosher and have a variety of options. And we're so excited to move forward and just decrease that distance even further for our students. So I've been on basic food assistance twice, and some of you may be able to relate to this, but when you don't have financial support, adequate financial support, my experience and with those I've talked to is you just walk around with a bunch of numbers in your head and you're thinking constantly, am I going to be able to afford food? Can I pay rent? Can I feed my family? And for obvious reasons, this takes away from the other information that you should be retaining when you're a college student. So some of the very obvious answers that you all have shared is this program lets students eat. It lets students eat, it lets them choose what food they want, and it lets them have that autonomy. I've noticed that we got a lot of feedback from student parents who would previously reduce their portions or go without food in order to feed their families. The food card represents a portion of money that has to go towards food. There's no other way you can spend it, and this means that you can't cut food out of your budget. Kindred Kitchen, our partner, previously, and now we're moving to on campus, focuses on fresh local food. And so there's a lot of different nutrient dense, fresh options. And it's a cafe. So students have the experience of getting to do just what their classmates who are more affluent get to do. They could go to the cafe. They had the ability to pick out their food. Our application was very simple and accessible. We had students self-attest to income and self-attest to family size. This did mean that we had more applicants than we were able to accept. And so we actually kept a list of those applicants and were able to provide additional support to them, most recently during the holidays, so that even the folks who were randomized out were able to get that support. One of the benefits of the application is that it's accessible to students who do not have the sort of profile that gets you access in our current community and society to food. So folks with different immigration and citizenship statuses, folks with not enough financial need, which is something that we calculate into our emergency funds and financial aid and things like that. It meant that students they didn't have to give me documentation. They didn't have to give me receipts. We didn't have to care what they ate. We just had to care that they ate. And it was a great, very accessible program. So many of my students have told me that the most important thing is that the program makes them feel like a regular college student. It makes them feel human. It makes them feel like their college cares about them. And it gives them the autonomy of choice, which when you are low income, so often you go to get support services and you are given a list of phone numbers, some of them that don't connect to anything or that need very specific requirements. And you don't just get to, go down to your campus cafe, go down to a cafe down the street and decide that, today I want a cheeseburger. I want whatever. One of my favorites was we had a adult student come in and very excitingly tell us that she had her first latte ever. It's great. We don't have to be in charge of what they eat. As I said, we just care that they eat. One of the benefits of the program, like I talked about, is it gets them connected to me and it gets them connected to other resources. So as I said, we were able to provide some support even to the folks who were randomized out of the program. On our application, we also ask if they would like help signing up for basic food assistance. I am partnered with DSHS, so I can actually do the typing for students, which reduces a barrier. I read all of the instructions aloud. I have some contacts so I can reach out and make sure that I'm advising correctly. And it just ensures that there's that other point of contact. They're coming into the office regularly, they're seeing folks, they're asking questions, and we really get to keep up with them that way. Overall, it's just been a really great experience to see how we could better support our students. And it has, as was stated, it's been a big push to get our Trojan Care Center developed, which will now house our food pantry with a dedicated staff member and fridge and freezer access, which we have not previously had. It will be now in our student union and will be available to students more readily. Right now, it's off in a different building on campus, and it's staffed by students who are wonderful, but obviously have some more scheduling things going on. So having that centralized location, having a food vendor, big things are happening at Everett Community College, and I'm just so proud to be part of this work. Thank you so much.
Jesse, we are proud to have you and Everett as part of this work too. It's very powerful work, and the way Everett has created the student experience is elemental in just how you determine to bring these resources to the campus and enable students to have that autonomous, connected, joyous experience that really captivates that inclusivity of belonging that every student desires. So thank you. Okay, we have a question for all of the panelists, so please feel free to jump in as you see fit to answer. Our last question is, Washington has been a leader in testing proactive food approaches for food security. What do you want other campuses, other states to pay attention to from the learning of this pilot?
Jennifer, I'm happy to jump in, and thank you to my colleagues at Western and at Everett. I'm very proud to be in this space with you. It's an honor. I would just say, going forward, the need is greater than we expected. We had a food pantry, and our food pantry is supported by an amazing staff and student collaboration. And we are in need of food donations all of the time. It is very busy. Even with this food security pilot, our food pantry continues to be well visited. And so the need, I think, has grown alongside the food security pilot. So I think I would just say that the need is greater than we probably all expected. And then two, I would say there needs to be a dedicated point person for the food and security grant. You heard from Jessie about how powerful and passionate she is about this grant and how she's such a lightning bolt at Everett. We have a colleague that is the same way at Grays Harbor and has been lovingly called the food lady. And so students know that there is a point person to go to talk about the food grant and getting involved. So I think it's very important, if you're going to pursue this, that you have a dedicated point person. And then third, I would just say, at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, in my 25 plus years in higher ed, this is the most common sense investment I think we can make in our students for the future growth and vitality of our student experience for their completion of their goals than I've ever seen before. So this is one of the most successful programs out there, and I can't wait to go side by side and shoulder this support for the next biennium with Representative Enneman to talk about expansion for all of Washington State. Thanks, Jennifer.
I want to echo really everything that Carly just said, including having a dedicated basic needs person, resource navigator, whatever the case might be. It makes a tremendous difference to have one person taking point. And then I also want to echo something that Jessie said really, really well, and that is that having food resources that are dedicated food resources, when a student knows they have this amount of money, or hopefully this amount of money to use for food and only for food, because as students think about day-to-day, as everyone thinks about day-to-day, rent is locked, tuition is locked. There are many fixed costs that you can't cheat your way out of unless you don't pay it. And food is like gets short shrift. And so making sure that folks have dedicated funding for that appears to change how they think about and plan how they're going to purchase food and nutritious food as well. Thanks.
I would say my recommendation is to do outreach to places on campus where for groups of students that don't typically engage in traditional ways for whatever reason. That can be a distrust of the system for very valid reasons. that can be new to college and you just don't know what options are available. I've been doing presentations in classes with first-year students or presumably first-year students, as well as with our transitional studies department, and that has been successful.
Wonderful. I just want to say thank you to our panelists, Dr. Carly Schiffner, Michael Sledge, and Jesse Ulmer. Spending your time with us today has been so valuable for us to hear, learn, and experience all of the things that you are doing, what you're seeing, feeling, and how you're thinking about moving forward. Lots of claps and hearts all throughout what you guys are saying, because this work is truly powerful. We are going to take a few minutes. I think there is a lot of questions in the chat happening, so please continue to post your questions in the chat. It sounds like there's a few things that we could have Marie, if Marie, you're still with us, address or respond to.
Yeah, and I saw there was a great question in the chat about is there data on what was the most effective assistance method for students, like dining plans versus gift card? This is an awesome question. And I started to type out a response in the chat that making this exact comparison, it's a challenging comparison to make. If I had unlimited resources as a researcher and we could do something like have matched pairs of campuses that are very similar in all characteristics, but the one thing that's different is how you're implementing the program, that would give us some really solid data on which forms of implementing it might be more effective. In the absence of that, I think from the data, and have to go back and double check all of this, but I think the biggest effect that we might see, the programs where we see a stronger effect, I think are the ones where we're providing more intensive services. And so what I mean by that is basically spending more money per student. And so sort of regardless of the format of delivery, it's the idea of more money per student, which, I had brought up that idea of that trade-off. Like, we would all want to spend more money per student, but then you're going to spend through your funds quicker if there's a finite amount of funds. And so, it's that determination that each site made at the start of this, which is thinking about the nature of need on their campus. And is this a campus where we see there is a smaller group of higher need students and sort of a bigger gap between those higher need students and more well-resourced students? Or is this a campus where we are just seeing that across the board, really high level of need everywhere? And so those are the kind of decisions that guided the sites in how they wanted to, are they going to focus on a smaller number of students or try and spread the resources out in a way that you can reach more? And I would say for these 6 pilot sites, the choice of exactly how to implement, like, is it going to be on campus, on campus, in-kind meals or food cards? A lot of those choices, I think, came maybe less about what's going to be the most effective and more about what is actually feasible, practical, doable, given the constraints of what kind of food resources are available on campus or not, and what kind of program even is feasible to implement given everyone's staff capacity. Yeah, so I love this question. Thank you to whoever asked it.
Those are great questions. Marie, if there's other questions in the chat that you want to respond to, please feel free to take a moment. I'm trying to look through the chat, but there's a ton of things in here.
Yeah, there were some great questions in here, and I think I was able to field them all in the chat, but I can highlight these. Someone asked about Running Start students, and at some of the sites, especially sites that do have a lot of Running Start students, they did include Running Start students. So if you're a Running Start student who met the rest of the eligibility criteria, you also could be eligible for the pilot. There's a question about, do we have disaggregated data, which at this point we don't, but we'll definitely be thinking about that for next year. I love that question. And then there is a question about, to what extent are the programs thinking about specific dietary needs that students may have, whether those are medical or religious, cultural, and all this is something that I think every single site has been thinking about. And, you know, again, each site has their constraints in terms of what they're able to do, what they're able to change. Sites where the pilot program was given through like on-campus food vendors, there have been some really cool close partnerships where the pilot site leads have worked, you know, they're having conversations with the culinary program to say, hey, can we expand? Can we change the menu? Can we even change things from, I know you're trying to do maybe more of a formal fine dining thing here, but what our students really need and want is more of a quick grab and go, and they want more protein and they want more fresh. And so these kind of constant conversations about what is it that the students need and want, and how to get how to get access to some of those choices in the pilot. And each of the sites has their mechanisms for making sure that they're hearing from students through anonymous surveys where students can express those kinds of needs, or where there might be some misalignment in what they need and what's available within the program. And I also can speak to just each of the pilot site leads. They get a lot of this feedback just through conversations with the students, through being a point of contact, having the students sit in their office during the enrollment, getting to know the students, and they've got a ton of information about what students need, and they've all been acting on it over the past couple of years, every year, fine-tuning to try and better meet those needs.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marie, for taking a moment to answer a couple other questions and highlight some really interesting elements. So we're going to go ahead and get on with the closing and get everybody on their way. So Washington's Food Security Pilot is slated to sunset on June 30th, 2026. It is the end of our 3-year pilot. However, we know that it's not the end of the work for how our state advances food security, specifically as we know there are significant federal changes underway. The strategies listed on the screen, some we're already working on, and others we're looking forward to moving on or creating a way to move forward on. Help create multiple pathways through policy, funding, partnerships, and practice to sustain and potentially scale the food security pilot in a way that is data informed, equitable, and aligned with Washington's broader poverty reduction and workforce goals. We're also interested in learning from others in our state and across the nation who may be doing proactive food security work. So if you are one of those folks, please reach out to Amy Magasos or myself. We are highly interested in connecting and learning and sharing. And with that, we are at time. So please help me thank our facilitators, our presenters, and our panelists for their time today. We thank all of you so much for the hour that you've given us, and have a great rest of your day.